Hello everyone. How you going today? Happy Thursday. It's a great day. I love Thursdays. I get to go and watch my daughter play netball. So always a fun day on Thursdays. So I know lots of you will be at work or you've got lots of stuff on. So I've been going through your questions that you've posted for me so I can talk about them today. So this little live is really all about answering your questions rather than doing a lot of the sort of explanation and the other stuff that I do in the other lives. So thank you everyone for putting your questions there. So the first thing that everyone always asks me is about my glasses. So I thought I'd just start with them. So we were talking last night about melatonin production. We were talking about cortisol levels and we were talking about sleep. And our sleep is blocked by melatonin, which we were saying. And this is my secret weapon. So I wear blue blockers. So I don't need prescription glasses, but I do wear blue blockers during the day. So it's a filter that goes onto glasses that protects my eyes and protects my hormones to help me to sleep. So screens have a lot of blue light, and that is what impacts our sleep at night. And so by wearing blue blockers, and this company is called Baxter Blue, and if you want to look into it, we have a discount code. We work with those guys; they're awesome. So they're called Baxter Blue, and this is the daytime glasses. So at nighttime, if I'm working on the computer or I'm doing some stuff, I will also use a pair of glasses that are completely red. They've got a completely red lens, and that really turns off all of the blue light that your body is impacted by, and it enables you to produce that melatonin so you can go off to sleep because the blue light blocks the production of melatonin. So if you would spend a lot of time on screens, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you need to check screens late at night, or you're finding that you need to do some work late at night, I highly recommend investing in a great pair of blue blockers. It's a real game changer. It's very big. You don't get that kind of digital eye strain, and you don't get the cognitive fatigue from being on computers all day. Alrighty, so let's get started. So the first question that I have here is from Megan. And Megan's asking, so is there a link between certain bacteria and associated conditions? So, for example, Epstein-Barr virus and thyroid conditions, so autoimmune thyroid conditions, or does it change from person to person? So Megan, absolutely. We see lots of correlations between certain bacterial overgrowths, certain candida overgrowths, certain viral infections in the body. We see correlations between those things and autoimmune conditions, symptoms, mental health conditions. So there is definitely a correlation. The biggest ones that we see all the time is actually Epstein-Barr virus and autoimmune conditions, and specifically thyroid. But we also see some direct correlations between parasites and worms and mental health issues and anxiety, depression, ruminating thoughts, OCD. Hey, Rhonda, how you going? A lot of those mental health conditions. So, if you are really struggling with your mental health at this point in time, then I would highly recommend that you do a microbiome test and look at, do you have parasites? Is that what's going on within your gut microbiome? We certainly see conditions of Streptococcus overgrowth, Staphylococcus overgrowth. We see H. pylori within the gut, and we see a correlation there with arthritis, with pain, with chronic pain, and fibromyalgia. So we see those as correlations. And we also see correlations between hormone imbalances, food cravings, lots of inflammation within the body, estrogen, that's gone completely out of control, and lots and lots of brain fog, elevated liver function, and elevated cholesterol. We see that in correlation with yeast overgrowths, with candida overgrowths. So yeah, when we've been doing this for long enough that when you guys come and do a health history with us, when we work with you, we sometimes without even needing to see your microbial test. Hang on, my glasses are all, I can't see. I need to clean my glasses. So I can, we can actually see, well, actually considering your health history and what's going on and your symptoms, we can really start to say, I reckon you might have an overgrowth of this, or you might find that you've got this virus within your body from 20 years ago. So yes, Megan, there is definitely correlations, and I hope that's helped you with a few of them. Oh, and parasites and worms with children with learning disabilities, learning, issues, behavioral issues, wakefulness, sleeplessness, OCD, head banging, lots of those things we certainly see with parasite and worms, and ticking as well. Okay, so Julie has a great question here. Are there really tests that enable you to determine for sure that you have leaky gut? So Julie, that's a great question, because even probably 5 or 6 years ago, the concept of leaky gut was very much kind of dissed in mainstream medical areas. It certainly was like, oh, what is that leaky gut thing? Is that really a thing? And so, yeah, there was a lot of questions around, or how do we test that? And what is that? So over certainly the last 5 years, there's been a huge progression in the understanding of leaky gut. And in the literature, it's called intestinal permeability. And, one of our dear friends at who works for Microbial Labs, who we do our stool testing through, Brad Leach, he has just in the process of writing up and almost finishing his PhD when it comes to intestinal permeability. And he has, taken on his PhD, he's built on a lot of research and a lot of knowledge that's already there when it comes to looking at intestinal permeability. What do we eat if we've got a leaky gut? What do we do? What are the impacts of that? How does it affect our health? So the needle has certainly changed in this area, certainly since I've known about intestinal permeability. And yes, you can test for it. There is a urine test that you can do. There are certain stool tests that you can do, but we can certainly see it through the markers that we see in the microbial test that we do. So we can certainly see, is your gut inflamed? Is your gut leaky? And what's causing that? So yes, there are tests for that. And we can see within your microbial report or other tests that we may want to continue to look at further, like testing for calprotectin and other inflammatory markers within the gut microbiome. We can see how leaky the gut is, and therefore, really start to build out that picture of, well, of course you're going to have food intolerances if you've got leaky gut. Of course you're going to have digestion issues. Of course you're going to have a dysregulated immune response. And so it's really cool, Julie, that we can see this and we can look at the level of that inflammation within your gut, and we can really build out that picture, as I was saying before. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, Rachel has a question here. I have done weeding to remove Sibo, 3 rounds on the diet and with natural medications, and now I have chronic sinus issues. My gut never got healed after. Is this from inflammation? So Rachel, this is a great question. And so I'll just peg it back one little step for those of you who don't know what Sibo is. So Sibo is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So in our gut, we've got the upstream, which is the small intestine, which is above the belly button, and we've got downstream, which is our large intestine, our gut microbiome, which is below the belly button. And sometimes we'll often ask you when we're gathering a health history, where is the pain? Is it above the belly button or is it below the belly button? And these are questions we like to ask to find out, is it a small intestinal issue? What's going on? So Sibo is the acronym for that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what happens in that Sibo is that we do get a leaky gut, food intolerances, you get a lot of reflux, lots of undigested food. And because the upstream is broken with regards to that, the digestive capabilities working effectively, it means that it doesn't all filter down appropriately into the gut microbiome. And therefore, there might be too much acid, there might be undigested food, the wrong protein molecules, all getting dumped into that microbiome. And the microbes that are in there can't handle it. They can't handle the pH. They can't handle all that undigested food. And that's when we start to get a die-off of beneficial microbes, and when opportunistic microbes start to sort of pop up and go, oh, this is my time to shine. I can now start to multiply and grow in this area. So Sibo is treated in a number of ways, but Sibo is basically where when we eat fermentable sugars, so when we eat foods that have got sugars in them that can be fermented and utilized by those microbes within your small intestine, if they're beneficial microbes in that small intestine, we create short-chain fatty acids for energy, like I was talking about last night. And we create all these wonderful metabolites that help us with our nutrient profile, help us with our neurotransmitters and cognitive awareness and so forth. or if we have overgrowths in our small intestine, then we start to get metabolites, and we start to get all of these fermentable sugars, and we get different types of pathogenic or different types of metabolites that are not beneficial for our body. So some of you may have heard about the breath tests that we use for, or that are used for Sibo. So you would do a breath test to see, is my body producing different types of metabolites because there's undigested fructose or these fermentable sugars. So when you do those breath tests, it will test like, am I fructose intolerant? Is there any types of oligosaccharide sugars that I can't digest, and so forth. Now, the thing with that FODMAP testing and those, the breath testing, the hydrogen breath testing and so forth, is that it still doesn't get to the root cause of the problem. So if you do a breath test, and which I did way back when, and it showed that I couldn't tolerate the fructose, and I was actually producing gases that were harmful to me, and so I was fructose intolerant. At the time, what I was told was to go on a FODMAP diet, which is to basically not have fructose, not have the, all of the different types of FODMAP sugars. So polysaccharides and, all the different types of FODMAP sugars. But it didn't tell me that I had streptococcus growing in my small intestine, and it didn't tell me that I had candida. The test just told me that it was bad news. Something was going on. And then the test told me that I needed to restrict. Whereas when you go and have a look at the microbial test, it tells you what's going on, who's producing that, so which microbe is producing the problem. And then we can have that targeted approach of herbal medicine and diet, so that really targeted approach. Now, so what happens is when you go on a Sibo diet, it takes out all those fermentable sugars, reduces everything down, and yes, you'll use a medicinal therapeutic herbal medicine, so which is what we use, so prescribed herbs, which is great, and that's called weeding. So the herbs go into your body and they kill off or weed out all of those overgrowths, so you can allow space for the new microbes to come in, the beneficial microbes that should be living there and doing what we want them to do for us, so they can start to take hold and they can start to grow and support us. But what we see a lot in Sibo practice and protocols is there's a lot of weeding, but then there's not much seeding. And so seeding is when you nourish the lining of the gut, you make the lining of the gut all nice and sticky, and you also are able to have fermented foods, and you're able to have the right types of fiber, and you have a protocol where you move on to seed the gut to create that diversity. And so often we do all this weeding and it reduces down the microbes. But if you don't increase the beneficial microbes to take over that environment and create the diversity, what happens, which is what sounds like it's happened to you, Rachel, what happens is that something else will then take up the space. And so if you've got chronic sinus issues, Julie, that's often a streptococcus or a yeast overgrowth all through your sinuses. And you may have actually got that from what's happened in your mouth. You might have your oral microbiome might be out. You might have fillings. You might have issues with your sinuses. You might have had exposures to mold, all sorts of reasons why it started. But then it will inoculate in your small intestine, and then it will start to cause inflammation if you haven't seeded and repaired and grown new diversity in that small intestine. So if your gut never got healed, exactly like you said, you will get inflammation, and the inflammation will just move into a different place in your body. So yes, Rachel, get on to that and make sure that you go through that process of appropriately weeding, seeding, recovering, adding diversity. It's a full picture, not just the herbs. Okay, so my next question here is from Rebecca. And she says, really looking forward to more ideas on keto and food allergies and keeping food as diverse as possible. So Rebecca, this is where doing a cultured therapeutic ketogenic diet really sort of kicks in. Because if you've got food allergies and say you can't handle eggs, or say you can't handle nuts, or you can't have nightshades, or all of these sorts of things, which a lot of people do have when they've got gut issues, when you go on a ketogenic diet, it feels like, hang on a minute, everything that's on a ketogenic diet, which is nuts and eggs and cheese and all these kinds of things, it's all of those big protein molecule foods that there's no way if you've got a small intestinal issue, or if you've got food allergies is from a small intestinal issue, there's no way you're going to be feeling calm, successful, and feeling like when you're on a ketogenic diet that you're getting somewhere. So I'm so glad you've asked this question, because we've got to get back to that overarching premise that if you've got underlying problems, you really need to be mindful and going on to a therapeutic gut healing ketogenic diet as opposed to a kind of current popular culture ketogenic diet, or a weight loss ketogenic diet, or a sort of what's happening in the media at the moment, and that ketogenic diet of just eggs, bacon and cheese. So for you, Rebecca, you would be focusing on what we teach at the Culture Wellness program, and certainly on our Kickstarter program, which is taking out those inflammatory molecules that are going to trigger those food allergies and food intolerances, and focus on foods that will keep you in ketosis, like the good quality fats, the proteins, things like liver pate, making sure you're getting bone broth and gelatin, but also really focusing on fermented foods, and because that's where you're going to add the diversity in as you heal your gut. And so the diversity is about, fermenting out your carrots, or, getting I've developed a diversity dough culture starter to make your own breads and pizza bases, and make your own little cupcakes and gnocchi and all these things, where you can actually ferment out the carbs and ferment out the sugars, but you can maintain that diversity and fiber for your gut microbiome. And so the fermented foods are like the key. They are the absolute non-negotiable for a therapeutic ketogenic diet. So if you haven't already, Rebecca, make sure that you're using the culture wellness cultures, you're making the yogurt, you're making the kiffers, you're fermenting your fruits and vegetables, having measuring your ketones and working on healing and sealing your gut. Now, if you've got food allergies, then we need to go and get a microbial test for you to look at what's going on in that small intestine. Why is it so inflamed? How do we restore that? And so you can move forward and not have those food allergies. Okay, so I hope that helps, Rebecca. Kim, you're in here. Hello. Is the pain above or below? you had another like penny drop, Kim, it seems. I really like that. It's just such a simple one, such a simple one. And I think just from my teaching background, sometimes I like to just break it down so simply, like, what are we at here? What are we dealing with? All right, Kim, your question's here. So let's get started because it's cool to see that you're here. So Kim's question is, can you measure or test melatonin and cortisol levels? So this is what I was talking about last night in the live when we were talking about fatigue. Are there indicators in the microbial test or do you need further testing? So yes, absolutely. You can test an array of hormones. So traditionally, you may have heard or even have had your hormones tested via your doctor, which is just a simple blood test. Now we go, of course, because my motto is test, don't guess. We go one step further and we actually use a hormone test called the Dutch panel hormone test. And this test is extremely in depth and super cool for all your, the boffins and data collectors and, nerds out there like me. And it measures melatonin, it measures cortisol, testosterone, DHEA, estrogen levels, progesterone levels. It measures exactly what your hormones are doing. And the coolest thing about this test is that it measures it over the course of the day. So you measure it upon waking and it's a urine test. So you do a wee and then you dip the stick in. You measure it at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and your last wee before bed. So this test is awesome and much better than a blood test because you're collecting that information of how are your hormones behaving over the course of the day. So when you wake up in the morning, do you have that appropriate amount of cortisol? Bounce out of bed and get started. Or are you completely flatlined? And when you see this, these results and this data, it's really cool. I see so many of our clients like, oh my gosh, like I have no cortisol in the morning. No wonder I feel like death warmed up and I've got to flog the horse just to get out of bed. And then we also see at the other end of the day, the marker for melatonin. Has your melatonin gone up and your cortisol's gone down? Or is it exactly the reverse? And one of the funniest stories is, so I get my Dutch test done about every 6 months, and I'm actually due to get it done. So I need to make a note for that. But I get it done every 6 months or so. And Gabby and I go through it and unpack it and talk about it and problem solve and make sure everything's okay. And when I look at my results, it was really interesting because I track them. And because I'm turning 46 this year, it's really important for me to track my hormones now as I sort of move into that perimenopausal space. And what's really interesting was I'd had all these tests done and I could see that my melatonin was going pretty well and it was all pretty cool for onset of sleep at night. My cortisol was dropping, my melatonin was going up. And I was super proud of myself because I'd worked so hard on it because it was a complete other way around when I first started having my test done. But there was this one night where, so you have to test it on your day 21 of your cycle, right? And so this one particular time, my day 21 of my cycle was when I was doing a live at night. And so you guys, I'm sure you will see that when I do lives, I get really excited. My heart rate goes up. I'm super, super happy to be talking to everyone and educating, but my body gets elevated. I get into that response of excitement, of, stimulation, activation. And then I do spend time after my lives coming down afterwards. So I might do a shoulder stand, do some deep breathing, have a nice, warm cup of the Culture Wellness sleep tea, read a book. And I really do have to work hard to bring those, well, I don't have to work hard. I just have, actions to do to bring that melatonin down. But what I'd done this, when I was doing this test, is I'd done all my tests during the day, and I had gone and done my last sort of wee, and then had put the stick in after I'd done this live. And sure enough, when I got those results back, my cortisol levels were through the roof and my melatonin levels were right down. And I was like, what's happened? What's going on? And I actually went back and looked at my calendar that day when I collected the sample. And I remembered, like, hang on, I did a live that night. I collected my urine when I was still in kind of that elevated state. And I just found that so interesting that then it had reflected what was going on and how my body can be in two completely different states. But also, I was so excited that it was like, okay, well, after I'd taken that urine sample, I remembered that I'd actually done all of my, calming down of my nervous system and bringing my body down. I'd done that all afterwards, once I was in my jammies and ready for bed. So just a really interesting story that, it's not set in stone what's happening in our body. So we need to kind of be mindful and know the tools if we're prone to things. So I'm prone to being elevated and excited and have always had high cortisol at night and low melatonin. So I knew that, I need these tools. I knew that I know what I need to do. So yes, you can test for that urine test. We do that through Cultured Wellness for you, and we also read those results. So Kim, many people on program will get that done during the course of the time that they're on program. And we often do that, as you get started in the Kickstarter protocol. So you wouldn't do it first up, but probably, within sort of a month to 6 weeks of starting program. And once you've had your practitioner consults and so forth, we would then go through that for you. Okay, so the other question that you've got here, Kim, is while we're getting curious and starting to introduce cultures and getting into ketosis and finding more sunshine, I love that, Kim, you've been listening. Are there any supplements your naturopaths often recommend on program to help transition, so reducing cravings, or is this where the detox tools come in? So yeah, whilst we're going into transitioning, we certainly do have lots of recommendations. A lot of the time it's cultures when it comes to reducing cravings. It's phenomenal. Those cultures really reduce cravings because they're introducing new bacteria into our gut and taking up space and competing that. But the main supplements that we recommend at Culture Wellness definitely are the detox tools. So activated charcoal, chlorella, bentonite clay, coffee enemas. And we also, someone's got intense cravings. We do have some other prescribed naturopathic supplements that help to work on those receptors of food cravings. And so there are a few other things that we use, but transitioning over is more about just food as medicine, great lifestyle choices, rather than actual supplements. So we're always aiming to use food as medicine at Culture Wellness and just taking the time to let your body adjust and improve and recover. Because for some people, if you've got parasites, for example, having more supplements can end up feeding those parasites and they end up multiplying because B vitamins, for example, or iron will encourage those parasites to grow and cause even more problems. So we don't want to be prescribing willy-nilly. We want to make sure that we get the foundations down first. Okay. Another question, Kim, I love all your questions. Another question was, I've seen blood tests mentioned on your platform. When does that come into play, and what are they for? So excellent question. So we use blood tests for all sorts of things. So for testing inflammatory markers, thyroid function, cholesterol, and looking at your total cholesterol picture rather than just your overall cholesterol picture, because that doesn't really give us much information if it's just what's my overall cholesterol. We want to be looking at triglycerides and your LDL, your HDL. We want to really get a breakdown of that to see what's happening. We'll look at liver function. We'll look at zinc, vitamin D. We'll look at your Bs. Did I say thyroid function? A complete thyroid picture. We'll look at just your complete blood chemistry as well. How are your kidneys going? How are your red blood cells, your white blood cells? And we just get a really great snapshot. We will know what bloods to get once we've had our initial consult and looked at your health history. So, and we normally organise your bloods for you after that first consult. So you don't need to do anything. You just turn up and we organise and tell you what you need to do. Now, sometimes it's a little bit tricky to organise bloods because we can prescribe the bloods for you, and we can show you where you can go to a private lab to get your bloods done, and you order it yourself. They send you the script, and then you just go into your your local blood collection place. They collect the blood and they send it off to this private lab, and then the private lab will send you the results. So in this case, you don't need to go and see a doctor. We can tell you what needs to happen, and you can use that private lab. Now, that really works really, really well if you're in a remote area where you don't really have great access to great GPs or healthcare professionals. Or sometimes people are finding it quite difficult when they're going to see their GP and asking for extra bloods like vitamin D, or asking for zinc levels, asking for thyroid function. There is a little bit of difficulty with some of the older GPs that haven't studied integrative medicine or haven't sort of understood this functional medicine area. They aren't as receptive to getting those bloods done. And so if that's the case for you, and I often tell the story about my poor dear mum, she lives in a coastal rural town, and her doctor basically just talked her down and why would you need your vitamin D done? And who organised this for you? I bet it was a naturopath. You don't need any of these bloods done. And so mum actually ended up leaving the consult without getting any bloods or anything that she was there to ask for. And so for mum now, and for many, many other clients that we work with, but mum's just a great example, we organise and help her with those private blood tests. And so then she just bypasses that whole area because there's not too many GPs in her town. And then she just goes and gets it done. Now, dear mum, the first time she went and asked for a vitamin D to be done, and the doctor said, no, I'm sure your vitamin D is fine. Once she got those test results back, her vitamin D was at about 36. And we want our vitamin D, at Culture Wellness, we want to see your optimal levels of vitamin D being around about 100 to 120. So even on the scale that GPs will use for bloods, mum was really, really low. But the GP just was not open to investigating it. And if she hadn't have pushed for that, she wouldn't have known that she was significantly deficient in her vitamin D. And vitamin D just plays into everything. Your hormone function, your immune response, your neurological pathways, your gut function, building serotonin. Vitamin D is so important. And mum would have just kept on thinking that she was fine. And we actually really needed to supplement her vitamin D, and it helped significantly for what was going on for her. So always keep in the back of your mind that we can help you with that and we can organize that if it's harder for you to get test results where you are and who you've got sort of in your GP or your local medical clinic. It is a private blood test, so it won't be through Medicare, so you will have to pay for those blood tests. But most people have to go and pay for their GP anyway, so it generally works out. If your GP doesn't bulk bill, but it generally works out okay. Sorry, just please wait. I'm so thirsty from talking. Okay, so I hope that answers your question about those bloods, Kim. And we will just let you know, and we get the results, and then we work on it from there. And so then we can start to look at a picture and track that picture. Okay, yes, Misha, have a chat with Gabby on Monday. And it may help for you guys. Someone else has also written there, are you able to treat family cholesterols naturally rather than prescribed GP medication? Absolutely, we can. And so there is incredible amounts of research about natural ways or integrative ways of treating high cholesterol and cholesterol issues. So the first thing is to look at your gut microbiome. Our gut is responsible for how we detoxify and filter out our cholesterol. So if your gut doesn't have the diversity and if your gut isn't binding to that cholesterol and moving it through the body, you're going to have high cholesterol. And when you get diagnosed with something that says, family issues, just, go back to that really mindful. Yes, it can be within our genetic expression, and yes, it can be in our family, but we know that our genes have such a small part to play in our overall health. And this whole concept of epigenetics, meaning that our genes are now not our destiny, which is so cool. So, I was just talking to a client last night saying, on one side I've got Alzheimer's from my dad's side, and on the other side, there's a whole lot of bowel cancer and IBS and gut issues and so forth. But when you start to know how to stop those issues, and when we know about the concept of epigenetics and the fact that our microbes play such a huge part in our overall health and our environment and so forth plays such a big part, then we can start to feel really empowered that you can change that. And it doesn't have to be, I'll probably get Alzheimer's because my nana had it. And my dad was starting to get onset symptoms of Alzheimer's before he started doing cultured wellness program. And now he's still working at 75. So, and went back to full-time work and, loves it and is completely cognitively switched on. So he's got the susceptibility there for Alzheimer's, and we've seen it, and we see it with lots and lots of clients, but it doesn't need to be your story. It doesn't need to be your story moving forward. And the cool thing is diet, environment, and lifestyle can turn that off. So to answer your question, absolutely, we can support you with that cholesterol. There's certain herbs, there's certain fibers, there's definitely lifestyle choices, and definitely very specific foods that will really support that to bring it back into balance. So yeah, that's really cool that you can know that there's other options out there. Okay, so Amy, does the microbial test reveal mold exposure and toxicity? Great question, Amy. Thank you for asking that. So we also do mold testing and mycotoxin testing, but that's another test. And we also do organic acid testing, heavy metal testing. We do all of the functional testing that needs to happen to make sure that we can find out what's going on with your body. So it is a separate test to the microbial test. The mold toxicity test. We measure through urine, and it's looking at different markers. It's not markers for microbes, it's markers for metabolites, so for those endotoxins. So yes, we can do it, Amy, but it's a separate test. Okay, so let me just make sure that I've got through all of my questions here, and feel free to ask more questions if you've got them there. So Bridget's asked a question about food for pre and post training if you are in ketosis. So this is a really cool question. So Bridget, yes, like you said, you would normally have a banana pre-training or post-training, depending on what you're doing, and you're running, which is such a wonderful thing to do. Gosh, it's amazing at clearing the mind and producing all of those beautiful endorphins within the brain and within the body. So there's a lot of amazing, awesome information around how do you train, how do you move, what do you do with regards to those things when you're in ketosis. And so the first thing is to look at what is the type of exercise that you're doing. Are you doing anaerobic or aerobic? So are you doing like short, sharp, HIIT kind of training where it's like real max capacity, you're puffing, you're at sort of that extreme level, and you're really utilizing the oxygen in your body, and you're really utilizing the glucose in your muscles, the glycogen stores within your muscles are really being used. So that's like that, weight training, the heavy lifting, that's Bridget, you're there. Awesome. It's all of that kind of training. But then we've also got the beautiful walking and the Pilates and the low intensity training that doesn't require a heap of glycogen stores and doesn't require a lot of oxygenation. So the first question is, rather than saying, what do I eat, and doing the same thing every time, ask yourself, what kind of training am I going to do? Is it using my muscles and those glycogen stores and oxygen or not? Now, if you're not going to be doing a lot of the big sort of HIIT training and all that kind of stuff, you can actually go into your training like yoga or walking, or maybe even just a long run where you're not actually sprinting it out, and it's more of just a gentle run. So for marathon runners, they do that a lot on their weekends for their long run. You should be able to talk in that long run, and you shouldn't have that big sort of oxygen drawdown. So for that, you can go into those types of exercises fasted. So you don't need to eat at all. And this is if your body's quite balanced, your hormones are doing all right, and you haven't had a complete adrenal bomb out. So make sure that you think about how your hormones going and how are my adrenals. So you can go into it fasted. And then afterwards, depending on the length of that exercise and depending on how you're feeling, you may choose to have protein and vegetables and fat after your workout for those longer exercises. Or if you're doing your short and sharp HIIT training, after that training, that's where you're going to have something that has got some carbohydrates in it to replace those glycogen stores. Because this whole sort of concept of being in ketosis and having like 5% carbs and being in ketosis the whole time, eating the same amount of carbs, no matter what, it doesn't work that way. And especially for females, it doesn't work that way. So we've got to understand what our bodies need. And so you might have some cooked and cooled rice. You might have some fermented bread. You might have a bowl of blueberries. You might have, if you've trained really hard and you've really maxed yourself out, yes, you might have a banana. And you will know how much glucose that your body needs, and you will know what's that sweet spot for you, because when you add that carbohydrate in, you test your ketones 20 minutes, hour later, and then you watch your inflammatory response in your body. How did your body recover? And was there a lot of oxidative stress? So are you in pain? Do you have the DOMS, which is like that day after muscle pain? Did you have any sort of, extra fatigue and foggy brain and all those kinds of things? And those symptoms or those sort of signs will let you know how many carbs to eat. So I have a very different, game prep and for what I eat before I play netball, because it's the game goes for almost an hour, and it's short, sharp, quick pace, high intensity, and for a long duration of time. And so I will need to have a little bit of carbs before and a little bit of carbs afterwards. But I use more like fermented breads, and I use like cooked and cooled rice and carrots, and not so much the fruits with the fructose sugars in it, just so I can nurture my small intestine, because I'm quite prone to Sibo. But if I was doing a mountain bike race, so sometimes I do, or once a year I do this race called the Epic, which is 5 hours long. And in that time, I will absolutely have a banana because it's high intensity, it's long, it's full on. I'm utilizing all my glycogen stores in my legs and in my arms, racing my mountain bike over the terrain. And so, but if I was to go to a yoga class or something, I would go into it fasted. And then afterwards, I just have a beautiful amount of proteins and fats, and would focus on the protein and fat rather than the carbohydrates. And this takes time to get to know what your body needs, and it takes a little bit of tweaking. And I have certainly made sure I've tested my ketones. I've watched for inflammatory sort of signs within my body if it hasn't worked for me. And I keep testing it and trialing it. And so, and as I've got better over the years and my gut has made more energy for me, and I'm more efficient, and I've got more muscle mass and all those kinds of things, it's changed and adapted over time. So what I used to eat compared to now is completely different. I can go out and do like a 10, often go for like 10K runs on Sunday morning with friends or with my daughter, and we do it quite slowly. And I'll just do that completely fasted on like a bulletproof coffee. And then I'll come back and just have beautiful amount of proteins and fats. And when I first started my journey into all of this space, there's no way I could have done a run like that completely fasted. So just be kind to yourself and be mindful, and do not expect that you can do a run fasted and that you can do a workout fasted and all those kinds of things, because it takes time. Also be careful and wary that if you are giving it a try and you're trying to train fasted or in ketosis and all of these kinds of things, or also be mindful that if you're getting like really brain fatigued, or if your muscles are heavy and they really hurt, that will tell you need more glucose. You need more glycogen after your exercise into your muscles and into your brain. Our brain still needs glycogen and glucose. Now, our liver is very adaptive, and it will break down from protein. The liver will break down that protein and turn it into glucose if your body needs it, but it won't be able to do enough for training or intense, high intensity stuff. It'll be able to break down protein in the liver for kind of like stable function if your body and your brain need some glucose, but certainly not if you're doing a HIIT training or playing a game of netball or doing a big run or something. So I hope that works, Bridget, helps Bridget when it comes to into that. And there's no hard and fast rule, and it's just about learning what you need. But only one hard and fast rule is make sure that you're getting a good quality protein and some good quality fats in, and making sure that you're really nourishing your body and really looking after your body. I certainly find that women overtrain and trash themselves. I see it all the time. I talked about it last night. see hair loss, adrenal fatigue, poor sleep, brain fog, cognition issues, and, really putting our bodies into a state of stress and alarm from training and overtraining. And so we also always want to be mindful that when your body finds balance, you don't feel like you have to train all the time. So when my body was really toxic and it wasn't in balance, I could not survive if I didn't run hard every day, ride my bike, go rock climbing, if I didn't go bushwalking, go for a run, whatever. And play netball, if I didn't do that, I was not functional. I would get angry. I would get pain in my body. I would just be so tired all the time. And so I kind of used my exercise as a crutch to be able to function and stay cognitively aware and allow my body to get rid of those toxins. Because, obviously exercise is great. It pumps the lymphatic system, gets rid of all those toxins. But it's extremely stressful, especially for females, to work out that much. Our bodies are not supposed to do that. We are not supposed to push our bodies that hard all the time. Women are supposed to have, we have very, very, very different inbuilt primal mechanisms within our body. We are, nurturing. We are really sort of that classic, feminine role model, not trashing ourselves through exercise to try and keep a certain shape or to be able to use it as a crutch to keep ourselves going. And so, over the years, as I've implemented my detox tools, I've noticed, I don't need to exercise as much. I can skip a day. Actually, I'm fine if I don't exercise for 2 days or move my body for 2 days because my liver isn't, overburdened. My brain isn't foggy. I'm getting nutrients. I'm actually making some dopamine and some beautiful brain, neurotransmitters. And so I found that exercise wasn't my crutch anymore. And it actually was a really hard thing for me to go through the process of not being the person that trains all the time and the uber fit, person. And I had attached a certain type of, I sort of attached this type of personality or this person or this story of who I was, to that exercise. And then I started to find I didn't need it as much because my body was in balance. I was quite happy to be calm and to sit, and it's quite happy to go for a cup of tea or go for a walk or read a book rather than trashing myself going for a run. And it was because my body was coming into balance. So yeah, it's been an interesting process sort of getting to know who you are when you don't have all of those things in place. And certainly I had a lot of food problems, so binge eating and lots. I've got a big history of emotional eating and food connections. And so, dealing with that as well and coming out the other side of not being dependent on food to make me happy and then exercising to work it off, which is our classic family picture of, I'll eat something that stimulates me and makes me happy, then I feel bad about it, and then I'll just train really hard to work it off and get it out of my system. It's a shocking space to be in, and certainly something I was in for years and had so many injuries and accidents and surgeries and so forth as a product of that. So it's really nice now to not be in that really horrible cycle. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I have gone through everyone's questions so far. If you did have a question on the lives, we've been answering them over in the comments as well. So make sure you go back to the recordings of those lives and have a look at the comments and see all the answers there from the Culture Wellness team. And yeah, if you need to book a discovery call to catch up with me to talk about what's going on for you, please feel free. I think I'm completely booked out for this week, but there'll definitely be lots of times for next week if you need to see me. And yeah, thanks for joining me today. I'll catch you later.